The aim of this video is to assist you to understand some of the literal and metaphorical meanings for Frost's The Mending Wall. But first, let's just read through the poem.
Mending Wall by Robert Frost. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it, and spills the upper boulders in the sun, and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair, where they have left not one stone on stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time we find them there. I let my neighbour know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. To each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves, and some so nearly balls, we have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side. It comes to little more. He is all pine, and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbours. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbours? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd asked to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offence. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there, bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top, in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only in the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes, having thought of it so well, he says again, good fences make good neighbours.
Alrighty, so what happens in this poem? I'll just give you a brief summary. The poem is set in a rural farming location at a boundary wall between two farms, and researchers believe that this farm is set in New England, which we know is Frost's context, and it's actually set in a farm nearby to where Frost grew up and lived on the farm. It's all about a neighbour who wishes to repair or mend a wall that has collapsed between the two properties. And he starts by telling the audience about the possibilities for the wall's destruction. He mentions in the first word that something has destroyed the word, and we can assume that to be nature or a force that is unnamed, perhaps wind or rain or the shaking. It's an unnamed force that causes the boulders to spill and makes gaps that are big enough for people to pass. He goes on also to suppose that it could also be mankind, named the hunters, who do not consider the farmers' efforts to keep the wall upstanding, but focus on their own selfish agendas to catch a rabbit. The speaker calls out to his neighbour to help him with the repair, and they set to repair the wall together. And apparently this is a yearly event. Every springtime they come down to repair the wall that's been broken, so that they can keep their boundary intact. Now, as the wall is being repaired, the speaker begins to consider why there even needs to be a wall to begin with. The farmers, who are neighbours, farm harmless produce to each other, apple trees and pine trees, and there's no animals that need to be fenced out like cows. And the speaker wants to ask these questions to the neighbour about why they actually need to have the wall between them. And the poem starts to turn quite negative. The speaker begins to feel quite bitter towards his neighbour, and his saying that he repeats several times, good fences make good neighbours. It irritates the speaker because it doesn't make any sense. He begins to ask, well, why does there need to be a wall? We don't have a need for the wall. And eventually the speaker ends quite frustrated by this task because it's a meaningless task. So that's some of the literal meanings. So that's a summary of the literal meaning. Now let's talk about some of the metaphorical meanings that we can read from some key parts of the text. Now this isn't going to be extensive. This is only going to be a few points, and then we're going to be talking about the poem in more detail in class. So the first thing to think about is, if the wall isn't needed, according to the speaker of the poem, then why does he insist to rebuild it every year? Now Frost deliberately positions us to take the side of the speaker to begin with. We see the neighbour as being the one in the wrong, the neighbour who does not want to make contact with the speaker while they're speaking, even though he's being quite nice and he's trying to interact with him. But it's funny how the speaker himself wants the wall to be built, but then says that he doesn't want to be built. And this is a question that Frost wants us to consider. If you look at the title, Mending Wall, and the two words mending and wall, the meanings of these words have multiple connotations in this poem. If you think about the word mending, it usually means to carefully repair or restore something. I think of, obviously nurses who mend, victims of war or whatever illnesses back to full health. However, the wall that needs repair is not just the physical boundary between the two farms. Yes, that is an aspect of it, but there's also a metaphorical meaning that the wall is actually the distance between the two neighbours, that there's an invisible wall between them that doesn't allow them to actually communicate with each other. And we can see that this poem is not just addressing the mending physical wall between the two farms that needs to be repaired, but also the relationship between the two parties. This is interesting because there's a double meaning to everything within this poem. So for us to truly appreciate what Frost is trying to get us to understand, we have to look at these double meanings. All right. I hope that this has given you some more insight into Mending Wall. I know it's a challenging poem to begin with because there's a lot of word reversal and it can be quite confusing. You have to read it slowly. I encourage you that if you're still a little bit confused, that you re-watch this video and that you reread the poem in your own space, and then take a bit of time to write your own summary that you could actually insert into your debt table so that you're keeping up to date with it. And obviously, if you do finish that, I can let you know about your progress with that table and let you know if there's anything else that you need to add into that summary. So thanks for watching.